Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a radical structural solution to a problem that honestly affects every single one of us, the modern crisis of economic ethics. If you've ever looked at how our global economy actually functions and felt this deep, unsettling disconnect between wealth creation and communal responsibility, well, you are definitely not alone. We're going to unpack a profound philosophical paradigm shift today, straight from Daesun thought. It totally challenges our basic, everyday assumptions about wealth, justice, and social contracts. So buckle up, because we're going to see how integrating a cosmic, cyclical worldview might just be the exact blueprint we need to regenerate our economic ethics.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the economic ethics crisis. Second, return-oriented social contracts. Third, the philosophy of Sinin Johwa. Fourth, the cycle of Sangsang. Fifth, comparing the two models. And finally, renewing modern economic ethics.
Section 1. The Economic Ethics Crisis. To set the stage, we really have to look at the very foundation of our modern economic systems, which is social contractarianism. Now, this was originally designed to establish fairness, right? But it contains a fascinating and honestly kind of alarming paradox. Think about it. Did social contracts actually erase our social responsibility? It's wild to consider, but our pursuit of initial justice and individual rights somehow managed to unexpectedly sever the tie between having economic freedom and having a duty to the community.
Now, what's really interesting here is what happens when basic liberties are pushed to their absolute limits without any balancing force. They essentially degenerate into excess economic freedom. We end up in a situation where we prioritize personal wealth way over the communal good, and that leads to a glaring absence of ethical obligations and responsibility. What we are left with is this deepened, extreme individualism and severely weakened communal foundations. We've essentially treated economic interactions as finite, linear transactions. Like I pay you, you give me the product, transaction over, zero residual responsibility. And that severed, linear pursuit, that is exactly what's driving our current crisis.
Section 2. Return-oriented social contracts.
So, how do we fix a system that's fundamentally linear and, well, severed? We have to shift the paradigm. We're talking about return-oriented social contractarianism. I know, it's a mouthful, but it's basically an ideational framework that completely redefines our economic conduct. Instead of viewing a contract as this one-and-done, severed pursuit of individual interest, it views it as a cyclic, reciprocal relationship. The whole idea is to overcome extreme individualism by embedding our actions in a complex distribution network that is grounded in the divine. Essentially, we're swapping out a linear contract for a system built entirely on mutual betterment, or Sangsang.
The absolute core principle here is returnability. The quote says it perfectly. Every human act necessarily undergoes a returning within the cosmic order. Think of it almost like a giant cosmic boomerang. Economic wealth and resources aren't just static things sitting there. They circulate. If you hoard resources or act unethically, the consequences of that disruption will inevitably, for sure, cycle right back to you. Conversely, contributing to the communal good, that returns to you too. It demands that our economic motivation be recovered not through sheer greed, but by recognizing our inescapable, deep interconnectedness.
Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? It breaks down into a pretty digestible four-step circulatory structure. Step 1, you form a Sangsang relationship. That translates to mutual betterment or mutual life-giving between the individual and the community. Step 2, you establish an ethical foundation for all economic conduct based on that very mutual respect. Step 3, and this is where it gets highly unique, there is sanction and adjustment by the divine, known as Sinmyang. And finally, step 4, this leads to the realization and the inevitable return of distributive justice. It's literally a closed-loop system of structural justice.
Section 3, the philosophy of Sinin Johwa.
Now, to really wrap our heads around this, we need to unpack the philosophical engine that's actually powering this cyclical worldview. So, the crucial point is understanding the concept of Sinin Johwa. This translates to the harmony of the divine and the human. It is the philosophical ground for realizing justice through the harmonious, organic interaction and mutual response of transcendent beings, the divine, and humans. And listen, this isn't just passive theology. It's an active mechanism. It transcends our usual dualistic oppositions. Like in the West, we so often separate transcendence and reality, spirit and matter, morality and autonomy, but Sinin Johwa says, actually, no, these are deeply, intricately integrated.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the distinct spheres of the divine, or sin, and the human, or in, actively interlink. Sin and Johwa isn't mere coexistence, right? It requires two dimensions of sanction to actually function. Humans absolutely must fulfill their moral duty in the physical world, and the divine realizes transcendent justice. When human will and transcendent sanction unite like this, it creates a much deeper, far more robust economic ethics than a simple paper contract ever could.
Section 4. The Cycle of Songsan.
So now that we understand the harmony between the divine and the human, let's look at the actual mechanics of it all. In this cyclic cosmology of returning actions, absolutely everything circulates. This mechanism emphasizes thorough accountability. Positive acts, which are known as grace, circulate and return to the doer. But equally, negative acts, which create grievance or chuck, will also inevitably boomerang right back. In an economic sense, this means distributive justice isn't just a nice-to-have social policy. It is a fundamental cosmic law. Resentment and requital are cyclically resolved through the fair circulation of resources.
But, this isn't just some abstract floating cosmic law. It is deeply grounded in basic human dignity. Take this foundational text from the Zhengyang. It states, "Sangje always used respectful language even toward humble people. From now on, there shall be no distinction between legitimate and illegitimate birth, nor between noble and commoner." This is just so vital. You cannot have a functioning cycle of mutual betterment without absolute equality and the practice of dignity. Recognizing human dignity way beyond social status, that is the absolute prerequisite for reciprocal prosperity.
Section 5. Comparing the two models. So how does this entirely different paradigm actually stack up against what we're used to? When we put them side by side, the contrast is honestly stark. On one hand, traditional social contractarianism relies on a very individualistic approach. It's a mere contractual relationship focused heavily on basic liberties, which ultimately leads to an absence of ethical responsibility, simply because the interaction is finite. But on the other hand, the Daesun return-oriented model operates as a divine-centered complex network. It balances transcendent sanction with individual duty, emphasizing structural justice and the continuous, cyclical returnability of both grace and grievance.
Let's move along and see how this builds, because structurally, there is a massive fundamental difference in distribution mechanisms here. The traditional model relies purely on the market economy and legal contracts to try and realize justice, right? It focuses mostly on just guaranteeing individual rights. But the Daesun model completely replaces that with a reciprocal cycle based on Sinin Johwa. It approaches justice not as isolated individual rights, but as a complex network of divine and human interaction. The ultimate goal is Songsan, a continuous flowing cycle of mutual life-giving and the active resolution of grievances.
Section 6. Renewing Modern Economic Ethics.
All right, this brings us to the big so what? How do we actually apply these high-level transcendent concepts to our incredibly complex modern society? Well, to truly regenerate economic ethics, we have to reform the basic structures of our institutions so they facilitate the circulation rather than the monopolization of wealth. We need to establish a composite responsibility structure where economic actors finally realize they are part of an interconnected, divine-centered network. We absolutely must substantially guarantee mutual respect and equal opportunity as the bare minimum baseline. Ultimately, this all requires a conscious, practical shift, moving away from individual selfishness and toward a reciprocal community ethics based right on that core idea of Sangsang.
As the source material so powerfully concludes, return-oriented social contractarianism through Sinin Johwa is not a mere theoretical model, but presents a practical paradigm that can substantially resolve the contemporary economic ethics crisis. And that hits the nail right on the head. This isn't just some dusty philosophy. It is a globally applicable blueprint. By grounding our economic systems in the principles of cyclicity and reciprocity, we can finally recover true economic distributive justice.
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to end on today. How will understanding the cyclical return of grace and grievance change your own economic footprint today? Just think about it. If every transaction, every bit of wealth hoarded or shared inevitably boomerangs back through the cosmic order, how does that change the way you do business tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, and I'll see you in the next explainer.